I'm joined for this Q&A session by Derek Webb, President and CEO of Biorem, BRM on the TSX Venture. And my name is Mathieu Martin. I'm the portfolio manager of the Rivemont MicroCap fund. And full disclosure, my fund owns Biorem shares. So Derek, let's just start with your background and how you got involved with Biorem.
Great, thanks, Mathieu, and welcome everyone, and good afternoon. I've been with Biorem almost 3 decades now. Kind of joined right out of school, undergrad in environmental engineering and MBA. Kind of worked my way up through the company. I did every role from engineering, project management, ran the service group, R&D. So basically dabbled with everything, and recently took over. Well, recently. Feels recent. It's been about a decade now that I've been at the helm of the company and working to really try to take it to the next stages.
Okay, perfect. So can you tell us what Biorem does? Like, give us the elevator pitch.
Certainly. Obviously, the legal disclaimer. There's probably going to be a few forward-looking statements made throughout the discussion. But here's the exciting stuff. What does Biorem do? I kind of describe ourselves as an environmental biotech firm that specializes in air pollution control. Well, kind of in layman's terms, what we do is we grow naturally occurring bacteria, fungus, yeast, and they actually use the compounds that create the air pollution. They use it as a food source. So this is a natural process, harnessing the power of Mother Nature to do the work for us. What's great about this process is it's fully destructive, doesn't create any secondary waste streams. If you look at any of the other technologies out there, whether it's thermal oxidation, whether it's chemical scrubbing, by getting rid of one air or one type of pollution, you're typically creating another waste stream. But in the case of a biological approach, we're able to do that with very little energy and no hazardous byproducts being created. These are not genetically modified organisms. If I wipe my hand on the table here, they're here. All I do is I create an environment so that the beneficial ones survive and everything else dies off. Okay? Where can we use this technology? It can be applied across a wide range of applications, whether it's petrochemical, semiconductor, food and beverage, basically anything that has an organic compound that can be biodegraded, we can address that application. Now, the part of the segment of our business that's quite unique for a clean tech firm is our exposure to infrastructure. And I'll explain that a little bit more. But typically when I talk about critical infrastructure, I'm talking about water treatment, wastewater processing, and solid waste. And what's interesting about being in this space, where we derive significant part of our revenues from this space, but it's fairly insulated from macroeconomic factors, right? Anytime the economy slows down, government pumps trillions into infrastructure. There's a lot of other growth factors that I'll get into in a second as well. So being on that infrastructure side kind of gives the company some insulation from economic downturns, but it also provides us insulation from competition. It's very difficult. There's very high barriers to entry to break into that market. And it gives us a lot of visibility. Budgets for infrastructure get set years in advance. They take years to be executed. So that gives us a lot of visibility on what our business is going to look like in the future.
Okay, so that leads a little bit into my next question, which is about the sales cycle. Okay, can you describe your go-to-market strategy and maybe the whole process from like bidding on a project to delivering, recognizing those revenues over time?
Certainly. So it's a fairly long sales cycle and delivery cycle, depending on the size and the complexity of the project. When I look at the sales cycle, it could be anywhere from 1 to 10 years. So essentially, what we try to do is, since a lot of this work is in that municipal, that bid spec government work, these designs for these facilities take years to develop. And we want to pre-position our technology before these tenders ever hit the streets. So we will work with the regulators to force certain types of technologies onto certain jurisdictions. We will work with the end user themselves, which may be at the industry or at the wastewater treatment facility, so that they can demand a certain approach to the project. So anything that we can do to position ourselves to get some favorable outcome on the tender day. So typically, we do all of this upfront work. Hopefully, if we've done our jobs right, we are written into the specs. We are either sole sourced, although that's difficult these days with anti-corruption laws. But we usually, if we can't be sole sourced, then we want to be the basis of design so that anyone bidding the job has to carry a Biorem solution. And that's really part of the game. In terms of once the order is received, it's really a matter of doing the engineering design, putting the package together, getting it released for fabrication. One of the things that I do draw attention to is, you know, and my colleague has used an analogy of kind of like the muffler in a car, is we can build as many mufflers as we want and ship them out as quickly as possible. But if the rest of the vehicle isn't built, then they can't take it. So one of the big challenges we have, since we're an end of pipe solution, is we can only ship our equipment once the facility is ready. You know, once there is a road built to the plant and their processes are up, then we can ship our equipment. So that delivery cycle can vary as well. That can be anywhere from several months to several years, depending on the size.
You recently won several bids, and you've been building your backlog to a record of over 50 million. Can you explain what's been driving this growth over the recent quarters?
Certainly. We've had a convergence of a few great factors. From a macroeconomic standpoint, and this is one of the reasons why I tend to have a very positive outlook for the future. So you've got a massive investment in infrastructure, right? Down here south of the border or in the U.S., if you look at the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, they're pouring trillions of dollars into infrastructure. And it's typically going into regions in the U.S. that have been underserved for the last 5-10 years. So that's creating a demand there. North of the border, up in Canada, and actually probably here as well, controversial topic is immigration on both sides of the border. But the more people that come into a country, the more housing you need. All these houses need toilets. The people that live in them need to bring their waste to the curb. So that drives the investment in infrastructure. On top of that, we've also got another factor with the increasing awareness to climate change and quality of life type issues. So we're seeing a big drive in those segments as well. So you're looking at the macroeconomic factors. Part of the issue as well that helped us generate the record backlogs last year was investment in new technologies for sales, new products and services that we can push through our existing channels. So started the discussion early on talking about biological solutions, you know, growing these bugs to do the work for us. But there's only so many contaminants that bacteria can eat. And to fully service our customers, we need to be able to provide technologies that address all of their needs. What's beautiful about that is we can kind of push this through all the existing channels that we have. So it's been a combination macroeconomic factors in combination with new products. And in fact, if I look over last year and probably half of the previous year, the new products account for almost a third of that backlog. So it was a wise investment for that organic growth piece.
Is there a recurring revenue component to your business? After you sell a piece of hardware, is there a follow-on revenue after that?
Typically not. Our business is based on its capital equipment, so we sell a large device. I mean, some of them are the size of this table, other ones will be the size of this building, depending on the airflow that we're treating. So they can get quite large, but they're meant to be an asset that stands the test of time. Having said that, with over 2,000 of these systems deployed out in the field, there is an opportunity to generate some recurring revenue. So you can imagine some of these systems will have consumables, they have controls and instrumentation that need updating, there's preventative maintenance, Biorem health checks that we can do. So part of the organic growth initiative that we've enacted over the last couple of years is to really see that. And in one of the presentations I was sitting in this morning, someone was saying, well, it's a lot easier to sell to our existing customers, right? A lot lower costs. So we've been investing quite a bit of effort and resources in trying to maximize that. So a few years ago, that service component that we're talking about here would have probably been less than 5% of our revenues, whereas last year it got up to almost a quarter of our revenues. So it's something that we're investing in that tends to be higher margin business as well.
What does the competitive landscape look like in your industry, and what makes Biorem unique, or what are you world class at doing that others have a hard time replicating?
Right, you slipped two there. And so the competitive landscape is really fragmented. It's based on geography, but also on industry and technology. So certain regions of the world are more attuned to using certain technologies versus others. Most of the companies tend to be small and regional and don't have the resources to really go global into other areas. And I think that's where Biorem is a little bit unique, whereas we have, not only do we have more than one product that we can sell to our customers, but we have a global supply chain and a pretty unique way of delivering our projects that enables us to compete pretty well anywhere on the planet. Bulk of our business is here in North America, but we do business in 23 other countries as well.
How should the investors think about your backlog? The $50 million backlog that you have currently, how much is it? How much are you expecting to deliver over this coming year, and the balance would be over what time frame?
So I think we ended the year with about a $50 million backlog from a peak of about 60 million. Typically, depending on the product mix, historically we'd be delivering that in a 12 to 18 month period. I think with just industry-wide delays, still with labor shortages and so many of these construction projects underway, that's been extended a bit. We plan for 18 months when we're doing our budgeting, but we do look at the 12-month and 24-month range. But I think it's safe to say that most of our backlog will typically get converted in an 18-month period.
You mentioned some delays in the industry lately. Can you touch a bit on that, and what happened, and how are you seeing this evolving over the coming couple of years?
We're still seeing the same types of industry-wide delays. Typically, it's labor shortages. There's a lot of discussion over why that is. Coming out of COVID, what happened to all the workers? But what we've seen in the industry is from the lowest service level labor to top level managers, there just seems to be a shortage of qualified people at every stage. So that's just introducing delays at every stage of the project once they've been awarded. But even up front on these infrastructure projects, we talked about the length, the sales cycle length. Well, the budgets for infrastructure get set 5, 6, 7 years ago, and when they finally hit the street, lo and behold, inflation has come over that period, and to a T, 9 out of 10 projects that hit the street are usually coming in at least double, sometimes triple what that budget originally was. Now, if it's critical infrastructure, you still need to build it. It just takes a delay. They've got to go back to city council, get a budget approved. Sometimes it goes back for value engineering, but we don't see any change in this in the foreseeable future. And there's just so much money that's pouring in infrastructure right now, and there's just not enough companies to deliver everything.
I just want to highlight the recent financial result that you put out. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. You came out with Q4 revenues up 12%, but net income up 200% to 2.4 million just for the quarter. 15 cents in EPS. Can you, can you share maybe what contributed to those strong results, and also maybe going forward, do you have any sort of goals or milestones that you're looking to achieve over the next several years?
Certainly. You know, when you're looking at a company like Biorem, I always advise not to look at us on a quarter-by-quarter basis. It's pretty lumpy that way. If you look at us on an annual basis, it's a lot more consistent. We have, as I was saying earlier with that car analogy, most of the delays we experience are outside of our control. And that's where you see this lumpiness, right? It doesn't take much when you're a $25, $30 million company. If you get $1 million project that pushes out of a quarter into the next quarter, it's going to look fairly lumpy. Typically, our business does see a back end loaded, so our Q4 typically is better than the other quarters, and that's usually because, you know, from January 1st, when we first get back to the office after the Christmas break, it's all hands on deck to try to bring projects forward. Things are always slipping out, but our team is trained to try to bring projects forward. And you start on January 1st, and the result of that effort usually always happens in November and December. It takes a year to happen, and it's because all of the other industry stakeholders are doing the exact same thing, right? Industry wants to spend their budget before they lose it. You've got everybody else, all the contractors, everybody else along the line is also trying to get results in, and lo and behold, it takes the year to make it happen for that last quarter. So my advice is, when you're looking at Biorem, don't look on a quarter to quarter, kind of look at the general trends, look at the backlog, look at the booking rates, and look at the profitability. And that'll give you a good sense of where the company is and where it's going in the near future. And I think the question you asked is, where would I like to see the company go? Well, we're continuing to build on these new initiatives, new products. We talked about the biological approach. If you look at the North American market in terms of the addressable air pollution problems, about 30% of it can be dealt with biological technologies, 30% with physical technologies, and 40% with chemical. So what we've done in the last couple of years is expand into the physical, which has driven a lot of our growth, and we're now expanding on the chemical side. To give you an example of a really interesting project where we're using these new technologies, one of the world's largest environmental services company has combined with an American company out of Texas and is building the world's largest carbon capture installation. So what they'll be doing is taking carbon dioxide right out of the air, converting it to a liquid carbonate, and pumping that deep underground. And they plan on building 25 of these facilities across the U.S. That's an example of where Biorem has stepped in as a partner on this project with some of our new technologies, chemical technologies, to help deal with the emissions from that carbon capture process. So what we're hoping to do with all of these new products on the organic side is grow the company up to 50 million top line, 5 million EBITDA, and at the same time still investing in an inorganic growth strategy and looking for bolt-ons where we can add value and complement our current offerings. So next milestone, 50 and 5, and then 110.
Can you expand a little bit on the M&A strategy? What are you looking for?
Our strategy has primarily focused on looking at competitors, so to buy customers, essentially, look for complementary technologies. You can imagine that, you know, selling a air pollution control device, that end of pipe solution, before you can actually treat the compounds in the air, you may have to do a bunch of other things. Remove fat, remove oils, deal with particulates, heat or cool the air. The equipment you put in may be generating noise, so no sense going into a neighborhood, removing the odors and the air pollution, and then creating a noise problem for the residents. So there's all these ancillary technologies that could be really packaged in to create a one-stop shop for our customers. So that's really what's driving our M&A plans.
I think at this point we could open it up to questions? Does anybody have questions? No questions? Okay, so the question is, are you fabricating the equipment that you're delivering?
The simple answer is no. The core of our technology, what we grow the bacteria on, we will manufacture that. But think of us as a hybrid engineering firm. So we design it, and we just integrate the components, right? So as I was saying earlier, some of our systems could be the size of this building or a football field. That's typically field erected concrete. We're not a contractor. That'll get subbed out. Same thing, smaller systems. We don't bend metal or weld metal, get other people to do that. That's part of our strategy as well for being competitive, right? To build a metal tank in the US and ship that to France doesn't make us competitive, but by keeping all of the engineering here and the project management here, finding a fabricator to put it together in France enables us to be competitive around the world.
Can you discuss the cadence of the bids, how it was last year compared to this year?
Excellent. That's the right question too. So bidding activity has been almost at an all-time high. The first 3 months of this year, we were averaging 1.5 formal bids per day, which is significant. We also have a near historic outstanding bid number as well. So what I mean by that is formal tenders that we've submitted a tender on that have not been awarded yet. Now, the reason why that's so important, and it's hovering anywhere between 75 and 85 million right now. The reason why that's important is if I go back over the last 15 years and I look at our win rate in North America on a formal tender, that ranges anywhere from about 35 to 52%. So when I look out there and I say, hey, I've got 80 million outstanding bids, I know that in the next 12 months, I should be able to bring in about half of that. So the understanding what that bid rate is and that win-loss ratio is also great insight into how the company's going to be doing 6 months, 12 months from now.
Anyone else? The question is, follow-up, is the reason for the increased bidding activity due to the new technologies that you've been developing?
I think partially, yes. It's interesting when we analyze the proportions of bids that are in each of the segments. So I think that's part of it, but there's also the infrastructure investment. You're seeing a lot of that money that is really coming to fruition. And we're also seeing a lot on, with the manufacturing onshoring as well. So we started to see quite a bit of uptick in the semiconductor side of things as well. There's been a massive investment in renewable energy, in particular in taking organic waste and creating natural gas from it. So we're seeing a lot of activity in the US on that. Probably the largest number of plants under design that I've ever seen. So we see that as driving that focus as well.
I'll ask just maybe one last one. You're about the $30 million market cap company, I think fairly unknown in the Canadian capital markets. And as you look to execute perhaps an M&A strategy over time, what's your kind of capital market strategy to get people to know about Biorem over time?
I think historically, or for the last 5 or so years, we've been focused more on the organic side, dealing with some of the legacy issues, and then trying to focus on bringing these new products to market. I think the management team has spent significant time looking at a number of companies. We're fairly disciplined in terms of the type of candidates we'd consider. We want something to be accretive right out of the gate. We're looking for companies we can add value to. We want to invest in the people. So we're not looking just to buy a company in distress or some shiny widget. So the whole M&A strategy has taken us some time to find the right candidates. So we're pairing kind of the capital market strategy with the development of some of these candidates to a stage that's closer to the end.
Anyone else? Do we still have time? Oh, okay. Maybe just on the risk side, what's the biggest challenge or risk that you're currently facing?
I think there's no real existential threat. We don't anticipate any changes in regulations that would impact our business negatively. If anything, I see regulations tightening up, which is a good thing, business driver. I don't see any disruptive technologies that cause me concern. So, the challenges are just the usual, right? It's how do we continue to grow and expand our products and services and get them to market. And that's typically what I lose sleep over is, yes, we've got to deliver on that backlog in 24, but I'm already thinking about 2025 and 2026, and making sure we continue to build out that backlog for those years. So just the usual day-to-day challenges.
All right, perfect. That's all for my questions. So unless someone has another question. Okay. So you mean the... Okay, so are the government programs in the U.S. accelerating the pace of infrastructure projects in the U.S.? Yeah.
To a certain extent, they are. I mean, it's making cash available, but depending on the size of the project, it still has to go through that process. So they have to come up with a design. They usually look at, a number of alternatives. They come up with budgets. Usually the budgets are too big. So now you've got to think, how do you value engineer this to get this to a reasonable amount? And then it's got to go out to tender. So this process just takes a while. These bills, these funds that are available now enable more of these projects to hit the street though, right? So whereas a lot of things will be sitting on someone's shelf until they can get funding for a project, these bills, what they do is enable people to start considering the project, but it doesn't actually shorten the length of that project. Wish it did.
We have time for one last question, if anyone has one. Okay, so as a Canadian company, is it affecting your business to have to source U.S. suppliers?
That's a great question. We do have an American operation, so we do all of the projects through the American subsidiary. So that helps us from that viewpoint. But a lot of these infrastructure funds do have very specific made in America clauses. That just means that we have to, our supply chain gets adjusted based on whatever criteria apply to that project. But we tend to want to do that anyways. No sense getting steel out of India if the project's in Chicago, right? So we navigate that fairly well. Being a Canadian company has never been an issue, only for jokes. Other than that, we do quite well in the U.S. It's our largest market.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Derek.